So our next topic here is our data infrastructure panel. I'm pleased to have Erick Schwartz from Equinix, who's played a number of roles. He's the Chief Strategy and Development Officer, John Mauck from Digital Colony, and John Eland from NTT. And John, if you want to unmute yourself when I call on you. A number of global players here in the data infrastructure space, and I'd like to maybe start it off with Erick. Maybe give us a little bit of a self-introduction in terms of the scope of your activities and how Equinix is positioned in the market, perhaps a little bit differently than these other global platforms. Welcome, Erick.
Thanks, John. So Equinix, as John said, is a global player. We operate in more than 200 and some data centers around the world, presence in the Americas, presence across EMEA as well as Asia. We position ourselves not only as a data center service provider, but also an interconnection provider, and Equinix sites are very dense interconnection and meeting points for our customers, which supports a wide range of ecosystems that we continue to invest in as core to the value that our platform offers. We're also extending what Equinix can support for customers increasingly into digital infrastructure, and so we operate the Equinix Fabric, which is a cloud interconnection platform. We've more recently introduced Network Edge, which is a virtual VNF platform, and are rolling out Equinix Metal, which is a bare metal service. I would say in being global, along with maybe some of our competitors, our positioning is very focused on the value above and beyond the core co-location service, and being able to support the needs of global customers as much as a supply chain as it is real estate, with integrated and consistent terms and conditions, single points of contact, integrated customer coverage teams and the like. And that's really, I think, where we see at least our customers' requirements going to support them in their supply chain. And that was only amplified once COVID hit and everybody really started investigating and shoring up their supply chains, including the data center infrastructure.
Great, appreciate that. So John, over to you. Maybe talk a little bit about the data center platform, how it's expanding, and then, as Erick mentioned, in the context of Equinix, what are you doing beyond data centers that kind of folds into that segment?
So there's two Johns here, so I'm going to jump in first and just assume I was the next one you were talking to.
Yeah,
actually, three John.
It's in your name, John. That's fine.
But Jonathan, thanks for hosting this. Sorry we're not there in person in Hawaii. We could all use a vacation this year. But in terms of Digital Colony, as you mentioned, we are focused on communication infrastructure. We're an asset management group with over 22 billion invested in communication infrastructure. We have fiber, cell towers, small cell, and data centers. We don't run all the data centers as one business. We have different businesses based on geography and strategy. But in aggregate, there's approximately 100 data centers that we operate, that we've announced, I guess I should say, more that we operate on a global basis. And we have different silos around that are focused on hyperscale at one end of the spectrum, very large purpose-built buildings. And then on the other end of the spectrum, thinking about modular deployments, the edge, the network edge, but very much focused on the infrastructure layer, really the plumbing. When you ask sort of what makes us different in our philosophy, I think it's this notion of the ecosystem that exists around the data center. Said differently, the data center connects to fiber, which maybe goes to a tower, to other data centers, to small cells, and we really think about that holistic solution. So our conversation around it isn't just, will you lease capacity in this space, but it's very much, where can we grow with you with our data center portfolio when we're talking to customers? And then how do those data center components connect to other pieces of the ecosystem around communication infrastructure? So excited to be here with these guys and talk more about it.
Fantastic. And John Eland, over to you. NTT Global, quite a number of constituent companies with presence across all regions. Give us a little bit of an update and introduction there.
Sure. Thanks, John. Yeah, so about 18 months ago now, we formed NTT Limited, which brought together 31 different entities under one umbrella brand. NTT Limited, headquartered out of London, 40,000 plus employees and around about 12 billion of revenues. So quite extensive in terms of operation. And that included NTT Com, which was the parent company of the data center affiliates we had. So businesses that would be more familiar in terms of name, eShelter, Raging Wired, NetMagic, Gyron. And so as part of the integration, we've also integrated those various regional data center affiliates into one global platform now, which is the NTT Global Data Center division. So part of the strategy on top of the colocation services that we offer as normal, as part of that data center level, we offer full stack solutions. So it gives clients and partners access to the full NTT Limited full stack portfolio. So be it hybrid cloud, digital transformation, workplace, cybersecurity, managed services, smart solutions, this sort of thing as well. And then at the layer one infra level, if you like, we've put together the colocation offering, which is obviously a significant platform. We have more than 160 data centers within that division. And we've pinned that with the global IP transit network, which covers more than 160 countries. And obviously, we've also got significant operations and extensive upcoming investments into submarine cable as well. So those three major pillars come together to form our global digital infrastructure platform. And that, if you like, is the layer one platform that enables the rest of the full stack services to be delivered upon.
So I think a lot of expansion to come for all three of you and the platforms that you've already built so far. I want to ask Erick and then John Mauck, as you pursue expansion via JV capital partners, and Erick, you've done that through GIC in a number of places. What are some of the factors in your mind, Erick and then John, that determine successful JVs, and what are some of the kind of pitfalls to avoid and things to keep in mind?
Well, I think much like any partnership dialogue, the most critical element is you need partners who have aligned objectives and ambitions. And for Equinix, working with GIC out of Singapore, they're quite, they have quite a deep asset base and a strong base of capital to invest, and the ambition to work with us on a global basis to build quite a strong base of both customers and infrastructure. And so getting that alignment up front as to the objectives and ambition for the partnership was crucial, and that's really been a key element of the very strong working relationship we've been able to build with GIC. I think the second part is that as easy as it is to describe investment in this space and others as just contributing capital, we were very focused on ensuring that our partner had the right experience and expertise to be an effective partner to deal with the entire business that we're building together. And that's, from the beginning of understanding the real estate and construction decisions through understanding the commercial elements to understanding the asset elements. And it's not that everybody has to work on everything, but the sophistication to understand how those various elements come together is critical. And that's enabled us to, initially we launched a joint venture in Europe. We've announced another one in Japan, and we've got some good opportunities in the pipeline. And so those elements have really come together well for us.
Great. John Mauck.
Yeah, interesting question. So when I think about the partnerships, there's really two different layers of that. One is simply capital formation for doing very large transactions. We brought partners into Zayo, for example, in that transaction. At the data center level, though, it's not really about capital formation. It's been about who is it that brings some local expertise. Because when I think about the physical aspect of developing data centers and communication assets in new markets, we're combining understanding sort of the customer demand profile the topology of their requirements and how it all fits together, but you have to find someone that understands the dirt, the zoning requirements, how you provision power in that marketplace. And so as we think about partners, we're typically looking for someone who can bring that layer of expertise, which is very specific to that expansion. So in some of the emerging markets, for example, you've seen partnerships around groups that we think can de-risk or accelerate our expansion into those regions. And that's probably the primary focus in terms of how we think about expanding and continue to accelerate the data center platform.
Great. Well, there's a reason we're not here in person. It looks like John Mauck and Erick are on different islands, and then the other two Johns are elsewhere, and that is COVID, right? So I guess starting with John Eland, and then John Mauck, and then Erick, you've expanded during COVID. Some of you haven't even done deals, at the very beginning of or in the middle of it. But maybe talking about commercial trends that you saw, was there any notable impact around delivery timeframes of projects, customer demand? What happened, and what do you expect over the next 12 months now that there seems to be a vaccine in sight?
Yeah, I think that we probably got the most exposure to construction and development. I think we've got 16 ongoing live development projects currently across a number of different markets. So it's been particularly challenging on that side, but I think it's been a real test of supply chain, and you only find out at times like this how robust that is. But I think that's stood up pretty well. The supply chain in terms of equipment delivery has been fine. I think one of the unique challenges we found was actually getting specialists around from location to location, because the blockers were more on the human transportation. So that has posed a bit of a logistical headache. I think in terms of demand, we've not seen too many changes. It's brought forward demand, so I don't think there's new trends in that sense. I think it's kickstarted a lot of digital transformation in enterprises that weren't necessarily ready for that, or certainly didn't see themselves as ready for that. And so, a number of areas that may have been under debate within certain enterprise clients, could it work remotely or not? That's been forced upon us. So some of those things have worked out well, some haven't. And so I think that's accelerated demand uptake in certain areas. And that's had that knock-on effect of bringing forward some of those plans from our perspective in terms of a pipeline. But I wouldn't say it's necessarily transformed or impacted in a significant way, other than that timeline being brought forward.
Is there an adjustment that you foresee if COVID were to basically diminish as we move through the year, or has the industry adjusted to new practices and there'll be no notable impact as COVID recedes?
I think from our perspective, we're expecting much of the same. We adapt, and I think the industry as a whole has done that, and there's been quite a lot of collaboration and shared learning and best practice learning as well, which has been great as a data center community and industry. So yeah, I expect it will continue on the same trajectory. Hopefully life will get back to some kind of normality sooner rather than later. But if it doesn't, I don't foresee too many impacts there. I think the supply chain in particular was under pressure in the first few months, but I think it got through that period now. And so this next year ahead, I think there's been a lot more planning, been able to go into it, and in terms of logistics and this sort of thing. So we're quite confident.
John Mauck, you acquired your way into Europe at the very beginning. You've obviously got active operations throughout the Americas. Maybe provide a perspective there.
Yeah, I think at a broad level, I would say, I think just like John mentioned, we've seen a real pull forward of demand, especially around sort of the hyperscale platforms globally. And I think it's hard to unratchet that, right? So we think this, it's pulled forward this demand curve. We've seen an acceleration of expansion from many of our key sort of customer partners. And so we continue to grow with them. As we think about what this means for sort of the broader market, we're expanding a number of markets globally today. And we, our cadence on that continues to pick up as we see larger and larger opportunities. So we think that will continue. On the COVID side, we were very focused on, does it disrupt development and construction, not the operations, where I think we view, it's a critical service, but really the ability to deliver on time. But if I think about sort of the other impact of COVID, if someone's trying to expand into a new market, it's difficult. We closed on obviously our platform in South America, Scala data centers during COVID, and I'll tell you, it was a little tricky when you couldn't travel to Brazil, right? And so I think it makes it hard to think about inorganic or even organic expansion to new markets, and that's a big part of the driver today. So as we look forward to this year, my sense is that there's pent up desire to travel for customers to go do things. I think as soon as we sort of uncage the tiger a little bit, I think you'll see a real pickup of activity in many ways on the M&A side and the expansion to new markets. So.
And then Erick, speaking for Equinix, perhaps more on the retail interconnect side, what impact was there? And as COVID recedes, do you see any reason for any changes?
I think for us, the most critical element, I think our sites are generally higher traffic and certainly more diverse traffic than a single customer or a dual customer site. And so our first step was really to assess our operations and decide how we were going to adapt to ensure safety for our employees as well as for customers. To some degree, I think our sites were viewed as a safe haven because they were tightly controlled, and we had to figure out what was the right balance between supporting customer requirements and their desire to be in the facilities with the safety of our employees and other customers. And that to the degree that the industry didn't expect this, we all had to really adapt to that. I think going forward, I'm as optimistic as anybody about the prospects for a vaccine and other steps that will bring the economy back and hopefully have the pandemic recede. At the same time, I think the entire world has learned that you have to be prepared for this and other unexpected circumstances. And so, for us, it's about bolstering our supply chain for development and construction, but also recognizing that we are the supply chain for our customers. I think there's going to be a lot more investigation and scrutiny of all of us as suppliers going forward because of the criticality of it. The other element that has come out of this, in my experience, is we've had much more cooperation and engagement with government authorities who, on the one hand, are very concerned about sustaining this type of infrastructure because they understand how critical it is. On the other hand, they recognize that a construction site could have 100 or 200 people any given moment, and that's a potential risk for transmission. And so we've certainly worked as best we could with government authorities, sometimes who were pursuing overlapping agenda. But I also think governments have a much better appreciation for what this infrastructure means coming out of this than they might have going in. I do think that, as the pandemic comes under control or recedes, or however we want to describe it, we will see an upswing in activity, digital transformation. Those who were ahead on it are happy about that. No, those who weren't are trying to catch up, and that's going to feed into it. I do think the ability to develop, deploy all of the digital infrastructure that could be deployed is going to take some time. So I don't anticipate a tidal wave. I anticipate more of a steady upsurge as things improve, partly linked to the economy, but partly driven by companies understanding that they need to do this to be competitive.
So I do have one final question, but there was one from the audience about, and hitting on a point that you just mentioned, Erick, and the other two of you have also kind of hit on, and that is, as COVID does recede, as digital transformation projects, perhaps accelerate a bit, what role does managed hosting play, connectivity services, cloud on-ramping? Customers probably need help in their journeys as they go through digital transformation. Maybe just a super quick answer from each of you on how you are addressing that. Or is it the case maybe that hyperscale demand is just so strong that it's not something that you have to really concern yourself with that much? Erick, John Eland, and then John Mauck.
Sure. We're expanding our infrastructure offerings to support customers who have either global requirements or just need support in a particular area, whether that's the bare metal offering, fabric for cloud connectivity, and the network edge elements. So we see those items as enablers, and customers are very interested in, if nothing else, augmenting what they do with their own infrastructure with support that we can provide. And so, we see that as a extension to what we do already.
John Eland, anything to add?
Yeah, I guess, and from our perspective as NTT Limited, obviously we have that wide range of portfolio services already within the group. So we provide extensive consulting services around digital transformation. So we help enterprise clients sort of plan and migrate towards that. Along with other things, we've created sort of our technology experience lab, which sits at the global data centers level, which is a plug and play test environment, sandpit, if you like, that sits within the live data center environment as well. So we make that available to clients and partners so they can come in and test and validate some of those solutions. So you could get the normal fears of adoption that sits within the enterprise level. This enables those solutions to be built and deployed within that environment. And then that's a sort of try before you buy test platform that we provide. So that enables those clients to move along that journey and decide which infrastructure investment is best for them as well. So we're trying to enable and facilitate at all levels.
John Mauck.
Yeah, no, so we very much focus on having companies sort of stick to their highest and best strategy and where they can create the most value. But we do, because we have multiple companies that are thinking about data centers, we have different strategies. We're very focused on continuing to scale with the hyperscale players and build out those campuses and take them into new markets and new geographies and new continents. At the same time, we have multiple businesses that are focusing on the edge strategy, right? As was described once, from having everyone come to the cloud to taking the cloud to everyone. This idea of what is the edge and sort of the network edge, where we're launching a number of locations around that. We're very focused on the shifting topology around this. And so that includes things like, cloud on-ramps and sort of points of presence that are distributed. On the services side, we have two businesses that are focusing on managed services and managed hostings as part of the solution, not necessarily a standalone, but an adjunct to the complex sort of hybrid cloud type model where there's some component of it that sits in enterprise's data room or data center, other parts that are outsourced, and how you think about managing that sort of complex rubric. And so we think that's part of the solution. But, broadly, what I would say to the question is we are seeing a significant pickup in demand of all those flavors because there's an increased digitization of every economic process. And so that may manifest itself in a requirement for hosting and services, edge compute, or additional growth in hyperscale, core campuses and locations. So I think yes is the answer. And by the way, it's nice to be in a sector where yes is the answer, right? I mean, it's a good backdrop for all of us.
So maybe 90 seconds for each of you. And a question came in from the audience as well, is around emerging markets. Where are you planning to invest the most? A lot of you have projects underway or acquisitions recently underway in places like South Africa, India, and so forth. John Eland, John Mauck, and then Erick can take us to the finish line on emerging markets and kind of what excites you the most based on what you're hearing from your hyperscale customers.
Sure. I think from our perspective, we're obviously, as everybody is on the panel, pretty active globally. Key market focus, I would say India, obviously we're well positioned there because of the legacy NetMagic business. So that will see significant investment based on demand drivers. A big focus for us at the moment within EMEA as well is South Africa and also the continent of Africa. So we're about to launch in South Africa. We have a new build data center underway in Johannesburg as we speak. And also part of the NTT stable is Dimension Data over there, and that brand has been retained as part of that integration that we've done, retained for the MEA region. So we're working collaboratively with Dimension Data. We will be incorporating 6 of the existing Dimension Data centers into the NTT Global Data Center platform as well. So that will give us a pretty significant day one platform, or significant for that market, with more than 21 megawatts of IT load in South Africa. And we'll be using that as a platform for expansion, both in South Africa and then across the African continent as well.
John Mauck.
Emerging markets. I think the answer for us is that we are very focused on the emerging markets, and so I'm trying to have a calm exterior while the team is working feverishly like a duck under the water, moving and trying to get deals done in every part of the world. I do think when it comes to being a good partner to the customers and to scaling, that's a unique opportunity, because in places like India, I think was part of the question, that is a difficult and complex location to do business, and so there's real value add to having a team on the ground that understands that market and can deploy capital there successfully. So, we do think India, we think all across Latin America, Asia Pacific, these are all regions that we're focused on. I'm sure I'll be bumping into Erick and John in lots of sort of corners of the globe over the next couple of years. So,
thank you for that, Erick.
I think for us, first, we continue to invest and expand in the established markets, and there's still substantial growth there. And we've brought on large facilities in Dallas, across Europe, Frankfurt, and then throughout Asia, and that will continue. We've announced our acquisition agreement with GPX in India, and looking forward to closing that here soon once all the regulatory steps are satisfied. We've entered 2020 expanding into Mexico, and have a lot of optimism about that market. We entered Seoul in Korea not too long ago, and actually just recently went live in Oman for a site that's serving as a cable landing station, among others. And so, I think for us, we see the opportunities across many markets. We're, I think, responsible, or trying to be responsible, that we can't be everywhere at once, and that we've got to be effective and focused when we do enter a market like India, which has, I believe, tremendous opportunity. And then we'll continue to invest behind the positions we've got, whether it's, the established markets or a new market such as Mexico.
Great. Well, I want to thank all three of you. This was a fantastic panel. We covered a lot of ground. Unfortunately, we are out of time.